Hello, everyone. Officially, welcome to today's webinar. I'm Joel Anderson, VP of Marketing here at Tier4 Advisors. Excited to be hosting today's session with our founder and chairman, Jake Sherrill, as we talk about third-party maintenance versus OEM support and which one is right for your business. A few quick housekeeping items. Today's session will be recorded, and so if it will be distributed via replay, via email, along with the contact information of our panelists. We would love to hear from you during today's webinar. So if you have any questions as it relates to third-party maintenance, feel free to put that in the Q&A button, which is down below of your screen there. And we'd love to be able to answer those questions throughout the webinar, and we'll see if we'll be able to get to them through all of them before the webinar's through. So without further ado, Jake, I will turn the time over to you and the rest of our panel.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you for all the attendees joining us today. We think that this topic about third-party maintenance and OEM support is very relevant in today's world where IT leaders are being asked to do more with less and think of new ideas that can benefit the organizations that they work for. So we're excited to speak through this and hopefully you learned something from this conversation. So we're going to go ahead and start with some introductions. Steve, we'll go ahead and start with you. Steve's with CloudCover. Steve, tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Great, thanks so much. My name's Steve Chesley, Senior Director with CloudCover. I'm based here in Atlanta metro area. CloudCover is a global organization that is a maintenance management firm. What we provide is software, processes, and services to manage all maintenance activities, providing clients efficiency and cost savings. I've been in this space for roughly 15 years, working from small organizations all the way to large global managed service providers. And so bring kind of a background of working with both end users, resellers, and technology groups to see what some of the good ideas and the pitfalls and how you manage complex maintenance management. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Steve. Looking forward to hearing from you on this webinar today. Eric McVey, go ahead and introduce yourself and the position that you are here at Tier 4.
Hey, folks, and thank you for joining. And Steve, thank you for joining today as well. I'm Eric McVey, CIO at Tier 4. Take out the trash on Friday. I've actually lived this TPM world in prior lives, and so have some good war stories to share with you today, and look forward to hearing the new things that Steve's going to bring out with us as well.
Thank you, Eric. And again, my name is Jake Sherrill. I'm the founder and chairman of Tier 4 Advisors. I'm also a partner in the Tier 4 group, both headquartered here in Alpharetta, Georgia. Tier 4 Advisors is the company I started almost 7.5 years ago on the premise of helping IT professionals simplify and expedite the procurement process. Additionally, along the way, we've also become enterprise architects as a service, strategy, planning, strategic sourcing, etc. We've done a lot of different projects around the world, and we have a proprietary database of our own of over 700 vendors that range from big, large brand names that everyone knows of to smaller companies that you've never heard of as well. And our goal is to help add value any way we possibly can without our clients ever feeling like we are a vendor or trying to sell them anything. So with that said, today's title is Third-Party Maintenance versus OEM Support, which is right for your business. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Steve, we're going to go ahead and start with you. Let's go ahead and talk about the definition of the topic today and understand OEM, so original equipment maintenance, versus TPM, third-party maintenance. Steve, let's discuss those two definitions in comparison, please.
Yeah, sure, thanks. So what we're primarily talking today is how do you support the infrastructure that runs your enterprise business. So whatever type of industry you're in, you have a certain amount of compute, as long as you have, if you're managing your own data center. As an organization, you probably have a mix of both cloud and on-premise infrastructure. And when I'm talking about infrastructure, I'm primarily talking about server, storage, and networking devices that run your business. When it comes to those manufacturers, Cisco, HP, IBM, that are providing the network, the server, and the storage infrastructure that runs your business, There's associated maintenance cost with those. When you buy, let's say a server, for example, you're going to get 3 years of base warranty maintenance from that manufacturer. To say HP, at the end of that 3 years, you have the opportunity, hey, do I want to continue to have warranty with the manufacturer, or do I want to look at a third party, someone else to provide support? There's cost and risk analysis on both ways, but it's basically who's going to come out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in a 4-hour response to fix something? Am I going to continue with Cisco or an alternative? And those are kind of like the very high level, base level differences between OEM and TPM.
And Eric, anything else to add in that?
The only thing I didn't hear Steve touch on is you know, and I experienced this in former lives prior to Tier 4, is a lot of companies, and it's okay, have a mix. So they find a mix of a happy medium, if you will, of third-party maintenance that satisfies the need, largely on legacy type applications that are hosted on legacy type infrastructure, if you will, and nobody wants to touch it. and the economics are not there to upgrade and move to you know, a cloud-based type system, but because it's such a primary and integral part of their revenue generating infrastructure. So a lot of companies you'll see that kind of have the buzzword is hybrid. They'll have this hybrid approach to third party and OEM support. So
yeah, and that's perfect. So as we talk about it from a Tier 4 advisor perspective, right, we're not pushing an agenda either way. We want what's best for the client. Oftentimes we are those, we're leveraged as a subject matter expert. So people are asking us questions about flexibility and control, some of the value, some of the good things and the bad things of different, you know, cases, whether that's cloud or hosted telephony or even third-party maintenance. So again, it depends on the use case, and to Eric's point, oftentimes hybrid or some sort of, you know, both types of maintenance strategies are worthwhile. So as we talk about flexibility and control, I think sometimes third-party maintenance is given a bad connotation, with the sense that there's a concern that going from OEM to TPM, you're going to miss out on something. I mean, it certainly costs a lot less, so naturally you would expect you're going to get a lot less. Let's talk about that for a second. And Eric, maybe starting with you, from the experiences that you've had from small companies that no one's ever heard of, like McKesson, Home Depot, Verizon, for example. What type of flexibility and control did you have, you know, in the life cycle of infrastructure using OEM versus TPM?
Yeah. The old saying is the CIO, director of IT, VPs of IT, you never get fired for hiring Cisco, right? But the CFOs love you when you consider using a sprinkling or more than a sprinkling of third-party maintenance in there, but generally because of the cost savings. And it was just amazing when I figured this out, is that, you know, sometimes the OEMs have, like we're going through right now, we've got clients that are waiting on gear because of the problem with the shipping and the COVID virus going around. Parts are hard to get. Third-party maintenance partners stockpile, and Steve can keep me honest here, they stockpile parts for just that reason. So they can meet those 24/7, 4-hour turnarounds, because they never know when that call's going to come. I experienced that. It was so much a transition, if you will. You asked about flexibility and control. The transition of turning in a support ticket to a Cisco OEM partner like EMC or HP or whomever, quite cumbersome. The third party guys it's a phone call away or email away or a portal away, and it's very easy to do business with these folks. So from you know, running around the data center with your hair on fire, trying to figure out how I'm going to replace, a couple hard drives, from EMC that I know is backlogged for 8 weeks, to calling Steve up, or your third-party maintenance person of choice, was so much easier, so much smoother from a support and operational perspective. At least for me, it was.
Yeah, and Steve, you're probably, talking with clients. I mean, you've probably heard this as a objection, so to speak, a sales objection quite often. Oh, well, it sounds too good to be true, or I'm sure I'm giving up flexibility or control on something. Why am I able to save 50% or 80%, going from OEM to TPM? And how does that even make sense? Why don't you speak to that for a minute? Because I think that again, very early on for this particular conversation is important to reference.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Jake. And one thing really also to kind of take a step back of when you talk about, they have to weigh in between OEM and TPMs. OEMs have actually, majority of them have been in the TPM business for years. So both Dell, HP, IBM, they have their multi-vendor services program, which they go out there and talk to a client and saying, hey, we want to simplify your environment. I know you bought, let's say IBM from us, but we'll help you manage your HP servers and your Cisco as well. And then they're actually subcontracting with different third-party entities on the back end to provide that overlay. And so everything we're kind of talking about today has been in space even by an OEM for a certain amount of time, or for a long amount of time, I should say. So that kind of, hopefully provides a little bit of a better comfort feeling of needing a little bit of a hybrid of OEM and TPM, and kind of the significance of how long TPM's been around there. It's about a $1.5 billion industry. So it's very substantial, very, very global, and there's a lot of interested entities in it. When it comes to the nuances of what you would put with the OEM and TPM, and why is it too good to be true, there are going to be certain things that would not come with a TPM contract. So we brought up Cisco. Eric brought that up. One thing that can be provided for, let's say, a Cisco support contract is patching and updates and software support, but the client would not be able to go out and say, hey, I want to upgrade for functionality. I read about this new release of iOS. I want to go from 9.2 to 9.3 for this functionality. That is a luxury that would come with the OEM contract. Same thing with unlimited software updates. So what let's say, for instance, in that network environment, you would want to kind of do an evaluation of, look at your applications, look at your infrastructure, what is key and what is core, and then make a tiered assessment saying, okay, with this, I would keep it with the OEM for this reason. For these, I would go to a TPM for this reason. The reason's cost, but also efficiency, because Eric made a good point when he was talking about response time. For us, we even manage both OEM and TPM contracts. And sometimes we'll have a client that says, the response that we're getting in the direct to expert on our TPM, we get it done quicker than the OEM. Is there any way you could help even augment an OEM relationship to get us to someone quicker at a tier 3 level, and then see if you can troubleshoot and go after there. So the customer focus, the nimbleness of the TPM industry with the right partner, really outweighs, some of the risk. But what you do want to make sure is that you're working with someone that understands infrastructure, understands application, and is more guided with you, of not, putting all your eggs in one basket, and really collaborate and have open communication on what the best next steps would be.
Yeah, perfect. And I heard you guys mention something about a spares program. A lot of people on this webinar probably have no idea what a spares program is. So Steve, since you're off mute, you want to kind of take that? I mean, again, is it a good idea to incorporate a spares program? If so, why? And, also, again, what is a spares program?
Yeah, great question. So spares programs can be used from a couple different angles, and it really comes down to SLAs, which is really what people are buying maintenance contracts for. They are buying a maintenance contract to say, hey, if something goes wrong, I want you to fix it. And the faster you fix it, usually the more you pay, is really what it gets down to. And so, and that goes on, and, you're an end user, you're going to have SLAs with your internal groups. If you're a managed service provider, you're going to have SLAs with your customers. And so there's two reasons you would use a sparing program. You're going to be doing evaluation of your SLAs, kind of what I was alluding to, of your tiered structure. So, your tier 1 or 2.0 applications keep with OEM. Then down as you get in, scale down on the importance level, tier 2, tier 3 storage, you go to TPM. Then you might have some archaic systems that are really not needing much support, that you could just put redundant spares there that if you need to pull and play. The challenge with just a spares only program is you need a way to manage it, because what that doesn't prevent is someone walking into the spares locker, grabbing it, and then when you really need that part, it's been taken by someone else. So you need a way to be able to manage that. Another way spares can be utilized is, let's say, for that very critical system. Because if you have a very critical system, you might want those spares on site. And again, have a virtual inventory of what that is. So when something goes, you're not waiting for someone to come from an FSL. FSL is a forward stocking location, which are, like, for instance, we have 900 of them around the globe. And so that's where you put all your parts that would be needed for a contract. But say you have a 4-hour response, you still might have to wait several hours for an engineer to come out with a part to fix. If you have on-site spares, then as soon as a ticket is triaged, you do a simple, grab that on-site spare, do a replace, and then it's replenished by the device that was already in one of those forward stocking locations down the road.
Yeah, the way I used them, Jake, we had a couple different last stops before Tier 4 for me. The way we did, we kind of had one of our racks kind of in the data center with those spare parts, usually drives, blades and routers, if you will, those type of things. And what we had done is looked at our ticketing system and kind of did some report running that said, okay, here's the systems A that are breaking down the most, and B, here's what parts are breaking down. And so we prioritized, as Steve had said, not only by dev or QA or prod, but we did by system at that level as well. So it can be very useful. And if you have your own shop, you've got them there, right? If you're in somebody else's data center, you've got their remote hands that it's a phone call away, and you're up in less than an hour versus waiting on somebody to bring a part from those forward stocking places that Steve mentioned. So it can be very, very, very useful.
Absolutely. And I know that we've touched on a few things already. So with regards to some of the other questions that we have came in, we had a question come in, from over in Europe, as a matter of fact, with one of our attendees here on this live webinar. The question is, in a cost-constrained environment, third-party maintenance savings can be used to fund innovation and new stuff. That's a compelling business case when you need to pitch something like that to the board or the C-level or your bosses, etc. Do you agree? And if so, what have you heard or seen in that sense, Steve and maybe Eric, by implementing third-party maintenance? And candidly, there's a lot of other areas that we see as well as Tier 4 that dollars get reallocated. But Steve, I'll start with you on that. Again, live question coming in from Europe from one of our attendees. Have you seen that? And if so, maybe share an example or two.
Yeah, no, great. And I saw it come up from Trevor. I was looking at it as well. And it's very true. And I think there was some, in a question, touch on some use cases a little later on down the road. But yeah, so what our goal is to simplify, or anyone's goal is really to simplify your operations and free up budget for things that are more important to your organization. So absolutely, if you can look for a way to find a great, a big reduction in your OpEx budget that can be used elsewhere, that's more strategic than replacing hard drives, for instance, then absolutely. The thing that's kind of interesting in it is that up to 70% of an enterprise's IT budget can be maintenance related. Yet it doesn't get a lot of attention from technology standpoint of management of it, visibility into it. And so there's a huge opportunity to go in and make an evaluation of your overall OpEx, get visibility into what those contracts are, what the assets are, what the life cycle of those assets are, so you make better decisions, and then find ways to make huge savings, because the number has already been thrown out to roughly half the cost. So if you can find ways to, let's say, free up, 1/3 of your OpEx budget based off of doing some very smart analysis, then absolutely, let's repurpose some of those funds to go out there and do strategic projects. It can also be used to, let's say there was a strategic project budgeted for your fiscal year, and COVID came into place and all projects got put on hold. Well, you might have already had a pre-approved OpEx budget, so you could look at ways to reduce that, then use that savings to go out there and do a new capital expenditure. Some of the things that we are getting really in the creative side of thing is adapting in artificial intelligence and machine learning to look at how you manage baseline T1 tickets. The reason I bring that up is, let's say you have a large environment with a bunch of your internal engineers that are constantly getting engaged with tickets. For the server type tickets, 80–90% of those are very, T1, kind of what Eric was talking about. Hey, it's a hard drive, a memory DIMM or something. And so if you have a couple thousand servers and you're constantly having to chase that baseline information, you're paying good engineers that could also be used on strategic projects to input, mundane type of tickets. So some of the things that we're striving to is like, let's focus into that area and say, instead of having your team have to input what you have out there, we're going to look at that environment, we're going to sweep it, and we're going to tell you, hey, you got this type of failure rate, and we're going to send out a part, and it's going to be fixed before anyone knows what's going on. So then you start to say, hey, how can I repurpose my engineering team from being, maintenance sweepers into, more strategic thinkers on how to improve the business. So you can do it from a human capital side all the way to a budget capital side, or some of the nuances with a well-maintained and managed hybrid environment, coupled with good technology. It's a game changer for the organization.
Yeah, and Jake, one of my former lives, complete software development shop. The real world example to answer Trevor's question, maybe a little bit better. The development infrastructure was literally 9, maybe 10 years old, running slow, and I got approached by a third-party maintenance partner. Unfortunately, I didn't know Steve at the time. It was someone else. But I was relatively new to the role. Nobody had ever done an inventory. Didn't know what serial numbers I had. I knew nothing about the environment, but I knew development was breaking down all the time. And the CIO said, hey, you got to fix that. What's going on? So reached out, and they came in and did an inventory just on the development infrastructure. HP was getting, they were trying to get it was $275,000 a year for this environment in totality. The partner came in, did the inventory for me, and gave me a quote for way less than $100,000. And when I turned that in to get approved, because I thought that's like a no-brainer, the CIO says, why didn't you do prod? And he said, I'm trying to figure out how to fund. We were going to a new ticketing system, and he was trying to figure out how to fund it. And he said, you just found half of it for me. If you go to prod, and you probably gonna find the rest of it. So real world, true story. So you can do it in stages, or you could do it all across the board. A lot of people don't like to rip off the Band-Aid kind of methodology.
Yeah, and it's interesting since you bring that up, right? It's interesting how still so many clients that we speak to, even in the middle of the year 2020, still have not fully considered third-party maintenance as an option, or have, but maybe not for as much of their environment as they could have, because again, there's many different categories to consider there. With regards to third-party maintenance services, what other services can a third-party maintenance provider offer that we don't see OEMs offering? I know we've touched on this a little bit more, but is there anything else that you guys want to touch on? Steve, maybe starting with you. software, platform, additional consulting. Obviously, we've already talked about, a spares program. But what else is there out there that might be compelling for some folks that, again, this might be new to, or if in fact it is something they already know about and maybe even leverage, maybe comparing one vendor to the other?
Sure. No, and you can get so much more than your base SLA support. You do need to pick the right partner based off of geo and location, geo and OEM on what's going to support. But yeah, if you should leverage your partner to also get more ways to enhance your business. So for instance, what we found is, and this is even more compacted really with all the remote working right now, communication with organizations is pretty tough. And so if you are now all of a sudden working remotely and you're not centralized, there seems to have always been that guessing game of, what is under support, who's under support with, and, how do I contact them and how much money was spent on that. And so there's countless emails and a lot of companies at the end of the day have been managing these large OpEx budgets off of spreadsheets. And, one or two people hold that spreadsheet, and if one person leaves, there's a challenge. And so those renewals get missed, which then turns into costly, research fees from the OEMs, or downed items that, maybe support the business. And then there's, some catching up there. So having a tool that helps with your internal communication, because who really is ever going to touch a maintenance contract? Obviously, your engineers are going to work on it. The IT management that want to get an oversight of, what kind of contracts out there, what from a ticketing perspective is going on there. But then also procurement. They're probably managing some of the contracts and the spend. And they want to kind of see from what's coming on. And then even the CFO and the finance group that's want to look at overall OpEx budget. So for instance, with our software, we're not only providing multi-vendor services, but there's a contract and asset management tool built in. And so at any point, when they have their own unique login, so they only see what they're supposed to see, but they can get a quick visibility. So there's no more, hey, who has got this under support? Is it under Cisco, or is it under CloudCover, or is it under Net? And when does it come up? It's all embedded at a point of a mouse, and you find out all the detail. Same thing in the IT, you can track the life cycle, of it, any of the data on there. So data is just a big thing, and having it easily at your fingertips is even bigger. And then we have our own custom built ticketing module that's been built in. And I was, just on a call 2 days ago, and we're converting a client over from using ServiceNow. So when Eric brought up that story of, hey, we were looking for budget for ticketing systems, that's something that, our software and technology has developed. Kind of was talking about the AI and all that type of stuff, where we're starting to single source, where you could look at your entire maintenance portfolio. And so we might support a subset of it through TPM service delivery, but we can also manage, give visibility and reporting on all your maintenance activities, even if it doesn't have anything to do with Cisco or HP, through our custom built ticketing module. So there's a lot. I think with anything, everyone's trying to do more with less. And so if you can find a company that's forward thinking, has some great technology, and they're doing it all themselves, I think there's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, and I was going to add, Steve, one of the benefits that worked for me, if you flip it to the budget cycle, right? Depending on when you buy gear and get the OEM maintenance on it and it runs out, it renews at a lot of times different times during the year. If you go to a third party maintenance provider, you co-term that, and you can actually pick when you want that to hit, and your CFO will love you for that. Yeah. Because you got a predictable OpEx expense, and you're covered really from a support perspective. That was really beneficiary. I remember working with the CFO at the time, and I was going, when's the best time to do this? And our fiscal year was April 1 to, which we always thought was ironic. Brand new budget on April Fool's Day, and ended on March 31st. And he goes, I want you to get it co-termed for the end of Q1, which would have been April, May, June, end of June. And the third party partner was able to do that. and co-term it. So you had a predictable budget line.
Yeah, and having a single partner that could support a global organization, that's pretty important too, because you know, you want, if you have one partner that can manage global, then you take those same budget constraints or concepts and you spread that around the globe. You know, for instance, you can then eliminate some of the BAT of some of your other organizations if it's all services, because you're not having to pay the tax on that because it's not a product, you know, going over a country line. And so, you know, we've seen a lot of consolidation of global support. And so where, you know, you can be working with a US arm to transact and manage all maintenance activities, but you could be service delivering around the globe, and you consolidate those budgets to whatever it is around, you know, what's important to that budget previously over, let's say in EMEA, might be different over in APAC, but you consolidate that down. So you get a better congruity of service for one platform to see it, simplification of how you transact, and then there's some cost benefits and tax benefits from doing it that way as well. So it's hugely popular.
Yeah, and Jake, think about it from a standardization of support. Steve touched on it just briefly. I wanted to expand a little bit. You got HP, you call for a certain amount of stuff. You got Cisco, you call for a certain amount of stuff. You got Fortinet, you call for a certain amount of stuff. You got EMC, you call for a certain amount of stuff. Consolidating under one provider, you got one call to make for across your environment. That's especially, and having run teams for 30 years, it's especially helpful for those, call them rookies on the team, those folks that are just breaking into IT and they're just learning to how the support function and the sysadmin role works. It's especially helpful for those newbies, if you want to call them that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Absolutely, 100%. Having one hand to shake, one throat to choke is a lot easier than 10, right? And at the end of the day, it's one of those things that, the right partner can really make a lot of people's lives a lot easier, for sure. When we talk about third-party maintenance, oftentimes one of the primary things is cost savings. So for a second, let's talk turkey with regards to how much money can be saved. What have we seen? I mean, and both of you guys have seen it really, quite a bit. But are we talking about a 10% savings? Or are we talking about a 75% savings? And also, is that does that affect CapEx or OpEx?
So it varies. Go ahead, Eric.
I'm muted. I was going to say, Steve, you start and I'll finish. Finish up.
Yeah, no, you're going to see it vary. I like to use this as a benchmark to say half the price makes it simple for, so if you got a $3 million OpEx budget, and let's say $1 million of that is related to hardware maintenance, you're going to go down to $500,000. You're going to see variances based off of different manufacturers. So you might see a 70% savings on a Cisco, or you might see a 30% savings on an IBM device. Overall, you should always be seeing more than 50%. So where the typical customer goes into is they're going to look at their environment and look at their hardware maintenance spend, because you also have software maintenance spend. And again, that's going to have to reside with who owns the software. But if you're looking at your hardware maintenance spend and you just kind of categorize, how much are we spending in that, across our Cisco SmartNet, HP CarePax, IBM, and all that stuff. And, generally, if you're spending more than a couple $100,000 a year, then yes, it's probably worth some time and effort to investigate that a little more. You are going to have some change, but if you can make some change to a partner at the end of the day that's going to get you almost a better SLA and more efficiency, it's a great change. But rule of thumb to say 50%, and then the goal of the partner is to give you a better than that presentation.
Yeah, Steve, wouldn't you agree that the age of the equipment affects that as well? So if your Cisco gear is 3 years old, it's right at the end of the original OEM maintenance. Year 4, the OEM costs are going to be about the same for the next year. But TPM, since it's still relatively new, the percentages may not be as good. So, for example, in my world, it was 8, 9, almost 10 years old in some cases. So that greater than 50% or greater was a true and real number. So, I mean, keep me honest there, but I think the older the gear, the better the situation is for third-party consideration.
That's a great point, and you're correct, because the manufacturer, their primary goal is to sell more hardware. And so they're going to increase their maintenance price year after year as an incentive to hopefully push you to buy new hardware. Why do you want to keep this? You're paying so much more. And while those prices are going up to drive a refresh, the part cost of supporting those are going down. So you see that balancing act of when it really gets to a TPM advantage. So right at that 3-year mark, yeah, you're close, but a little bit lower. But yeah, when you get on in the life cycle, sometimes manufacturers will say, I'm not supporting this anymore either. And you have to make a compelling case. That's like when we do a life cycle sweep, we'll go out there and show what is current, what is end of life, and what's end of service. So if something's end of service, and that means you don't have the option to renew it with the manufacturer after this date. So you need to come up with a hybrid solution if you still want that device in there. And right now, since people are trying to do a little bit more with the budgets they have, with everything with COVID and there's a little unknown, sweating those assets a little bit longer, getting another year or two depreciation, if you can find a way to do that, it's going to benefit everybody. So that's what we're seeing. There's an uptick. I was in the industry in 2009 when that big recession hit, huge uptick then. We're kind of seeing it more now. There's a little more technology requirements these days. And so, that's where we started doubling down in that space because it's all about user experience and efficiency and how do you do more with data. But people want the cost savings. That's what it comes down to. And it's more and more important right now.
Yeah. And that's when it becomes a CapEx conversation as well, kicking that can down the road in terms of refreshing your gear. As a former sysadmin, boots on the ground kind of guy, I always wanted the latest greatest, but that didn't always work from a budget standpoint. So that's where the CapEx part comes in.
And as we talk about, specifically where third-party maintenance makes the most sense, I mean, what is the ideal customer profile? Is this do they have to be a Fortune 50 for it to make a lot of sense, Steve? Or, does it make sense in a 200-person law firm instead?
It's a good question. It's a hard question because it really comes down to how much technology do they use to run their business. I've worked with, $150 million companies that buy and utilize more technology than a $2 billion organization. Right. It just depends on, how much compute and network and storage do they need to run their business. But, so it's also, if someone's in the cloud, this is irrelevant. When you make a decision to go to the cloud, you've said, hey, I don't want to manage any of this infrastructure anymore. I don't want to pay these maintenance bills. I don't want to see these servers and network. Let someone else fool with it. I'll do a small chunk of it because you have to have some interconnectivity. But if you've made a heavy cloud investment, that's not a good candidate. Now, I think we're seeing more and more people kind of come back from the cloud a little bit because of some of the increasing cost of that. And then also for security reasons, there's always going to be virtual private instances where they don't want anything shared. And so there's always going to be, if you own the iron at some point on your books and you want to maintain it and your spend on that, OpEx budget is, again, probably over a couple $100,000 a year, then it's good. So we support everything from multi-billion global MSPs, end users, down to, small to mid-sized businesses. It just all depends on how much infrastructure they need to run their business.
And Gartner states that 71% of very large enterprise companies leverage TPM, third-party maintenance, for support. It estimates that third-party maintenance RFIs and RFPs will increase by 35% by the end of this year. So third-party maintenance is obviously becoming more mainstream, but what do you perceive to be the cause of this increase other than maybe just price in and of itself?
I think it's price and also the efficiencies. I think Eric had noticed this as well, is the customer focus side. I think in general, America's is run on a lot of small to mid-sized businesses. A lot of times there's innovation there, there's flexibility there. That's trickling down even from the maintenance services side of things. If they're working with an organization, people want to partner with a partner that's going to listen to them and make adjustments and not be rigid and say, you got to follow this rule line because everyone's business is a little different. And so, where I've seen is that working with clients on like, hey, if you share what you're really trying to change or really like where you want to get to, or maybe what your real problem is, then you can take a step back and change that with some technology, configuration of some software of how you get that to adapt. So I think all that, that request of like, hey, can you help me out with this, be more consultative, save me some money. And also we're getting such a good response and rapport here. If you can help me do this, I'd like to do more of it. And then you couple on, hey, can you solve my contract management issues, my asset management issues, my budget issues by giving me a budget module, all these different managed services. So I got one throat to choke to manage all these different vendors, but I have a unified service delivery team. Those are some of the things that have just continued to creep up the increase in demand. And I think even when we get through 2020, it'll still continue because I think it's just it makes sense. It's how you probably manage some of your own home finances. You look at it smartly, and you don't just make rash. Just I'm going to make this always safe. You got to make logical decisions that that align with your goals. And I think that's why the TPM industry has been growing so much.
Yeah, companies are looking to streamline everywhere from a cost perspective, especially now. Unfortunately, where's the first place most companies look is IT, because that's largely, other than personnel, that's usually a company's largest expense. And so IT folks are having to kind of learn how to streamline and become more business friendly or business accommodating, if you will. Arguably third party maintenance is one of those ways, like we've kind of already talked about, in that the standardization of one call to make for across the board, the cost savings that you're delivering back to the business, and in true and real immediate dollars, the predictability of the spend, those are all things that help support those business initiatives.
100%. And I see Joel jumping on here, so we're going to be getting the hook here in just a second. But with regards to just kind of tying this up, we've got a number of different attendees from actually all over the world here on this particular webinar. We'll probably have 10 times the amount of people watching this on replay than actually joined us live as well. If someone is watching this and they're an IT end user, if they're an influencer within an organization, and they say, hey, this sounds like a really good idea. They may or may not have done something like this in the past. What are the first steps to take when considering, implementing third-party maintenance? And also, what does a successful implementation look like, and how long does it take on average? Steve, I'll let you answer that one.
Okay, yeah. It's very simple, and that's the goal, kind of when I was talking about what people are looking for. So you can start with a simple evaluation of what you have out there in your environment. And like I said today, most of that is there on spreadsheets. So you evaluate and have open communication of, the severity of those applications. You can very quickly get a pricing on that and then work to get that implemented into a service contract. That can happen in a matter of a week. From our software, we can upload 50,000 assets in 5 minutes. The only thing that's going to be delayed there is if you got to stock up on a for your hardware on site. But it's very simple to get started. You just want to have a conversation with someone that understands technology, understands how to kind of provide a hybrid approach, and then very simple, very quick.
Yeah, it took me, Jake, a real world example, it took me about a month to get up and running fully with TPM. And you know what the largest part of that was? Getting the OEM contract canceled. That was the longest part of the whole process, was getting all that canceled and working through legal with that. But to stand it up TPM is a quick and easy process.
Well, we want to thank all the attendees, certainly Eric and Steve. We greatly appreciate your time today. For those of you who are watching around the country and also around the world, if you have any sort of projects coming up in the near future in data center, telecom, managed services, security, compliance, or emerging tech, please think of Tier 4 Advisors as your go-to, one hand to shake, one call to make advisor in that sense. With a proprietary database of over 700 vendors and experience and over 1,000 projects, we are here to help any way we possibly can. Not in an effort to ever sell you anything, but literally and figuratively sit on your side of the table. This is why I founded this business 7.5 years ago, and this is why we continue to do what we do every single day in dozens of markets around the country. With that said, Joel, I'll turn it back over to you. Thanks, everybody.
Excellent. Thanks, Jake. Thank you, Steve and Eric. Great insight. If you have any questions, as Jake mentioned, that's related to third-party maintenance, love to have a further conversation. You can either visit tier4advisors.com or reach out to a Tier 4 Advisors team member, and we'd be glad to have a conversation. Also introduce you one-on-one with Steve and his organization. We look forward to having you join us on next week's webinar as well, Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern, as we dive into which cloud is right for you, public hyperscaler, hyperconverged, virtual public, virtual private, or dedicated private. This should be a very interesting conversation, so we look forward to that. Thank you again to everyone. We will see you next week. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.